Ahead, we'll talk to State Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce about the Trump-Putin summit meeting, and Karl Rove is on deck in Texas about the heated redistricting war there. President Trump's sky-high tariffs just took effect in 90 countries, sparking a debate about whether consumers will be hit with higher prices or whether this will boost American manufacturing. That has brought the media's white-hot spotlight back to the economy and whether the president is mishandling some disappointing news by going on offense. Let's face it, no one had heard of Erica McIntyre until about 10 minutes ago. But when she announced a weak jobs number, 73,000, for the month of July, President Trump fired her, saying the Biden appointee had rigged the numbers to make him and the Republicans look bad. He offered no proof for this charge, but will her successor's numbers be trusted under the circumstances?
I believe the numbers were phony, just like they were before the election, and there were other times. So you know what I did? I fired her.
Joe Kernan is usually a pro-Trump voice on CNBC. He fact-checked the president on his charge of phony numbers.
Where do you get the notion that it's rigged, or do you have any evidence there?
It is antiquated, but it's also very political. And, you know, I had an election recently where I did very well, won every swing state, won the popular vote, won everything, all right?
Trump's BLS commissioner in the first term, Bill Beach, is highly critical.
I don't think there's any grounds at all for this firing, and it really hurts the statistical system. It undermines credibility in BLS.
Trump's informal economic advisor, Stephen Moore, brought happier numbers, saying the average median family income for the first 5 months of the year is up $1,174, which the president pronounced incredible. Some in the media are saying Trump's suspicion of the BLS figures are justified.
You can't be surprised that people look at this and they see these errors, and they so often go in one direction, especially over the past 4 years under the Biden administration. They kept going in one, helping before the election, and then the revision would turn out to actually lower the numbers for jobs.
Democrats are going haywire, no big surprise there, and media liberals say the president went too far.
So firing one department head in order to censor the truth is bad enough on its own. But it speaks to a larger political project by this White House and this administration. Donald Trump does not want you to know the truth.
We may just get new people installed at the Bureau of Labor Statistics whose orders are bring down inflation, bring down that number.
Now, the same goes for monthly revisions, which in this case downgraded the previous 2 months by 258,000, which Trump also calls phony. But the economy hasn't changed. And despite the media and political warfare, and what most pundits are failing to realize is that even negative coverage helps him drive the media agenda, shifting the focus to whether the process has been fair. I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Robby Soave, senior editor at Reason Magazine, and Steph Kite, correspondent for Axios. Robby, even some conservatives are saying that Trump went too far in saying the numbers were rigged deliberately against him. The media coverage has certainly been negative.
Yes, and look, I'll concede that I think it was not a great look to, make it seem like you don't like the numbers, so find me someone who'll give me a report I do want. But that said, there have been serious concerns about the scope of these revisions. If Trump's going to say it's politically motivated, he should have given some evidence of that. But what he could just say is, we want competence in government. They came in to fire people in the government who are not working effectively. These are numbers that the private sector relies on accuracy, and the revisions have been all over the place. So if we just focus on whether the person in the position is doing a competent job, I think maybe then you could make a case that someone else should do it so that we have fewer large-scale revisions. But if he's going to say it's politically motivated, then he has to prove that.
Steph, I'm sure he likes Stephen Moore's calculations better. But the question now is, can anyone have confidence in these numbers? Or will the person that he points to replace the high official that he fired just provide figures to make Trump look good?
Well, this is the concern that we're hearing from a lot of people and even some Republicans, that the fact that Trump decided to fire this person in this way, someone who, as you point out, is not really a high-profile person, right? This is a statistician. This is someone who looks at numbers. It's behind the scenes. The fact that Trump has now put so much focus on this and claimed that there's political motivation there, it now raises this question, okay, well then is he going to go and find a political actor to fill that role? Whether or not that's a decision he actually makes, the way that he's gone about this firing is going to raise questions, especially for people who are already predisposed to be critical and suspicious of the moves that he makes. And, you know, this news broke while Senate Republicans were still finishing up business on the Hill, so we heard a little bit of reaction from them in the halls, and there was kind of a split. There were some Republicans, maybe the ones you would expect, people like Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, who, you know, made comments to the fact of, you know, oh, when you don't like the news, shoot the messenger,
right.
Saying that this was problematic. Others, you know, other Republicans say, yeah, there's a lot of distrust with economists. There already is a lot of distrust in the way this process is played out. They do point to the fact that there are these significant revisions when we get these jobs reports.
This may be a problem, but is a longer-term problem,
exactly.
Rather than, I mean, the president's critics say this is aimed at him. But, you know, Erica McIntyre, somebody who none of us had heard of, was a respected bureaucrat, Robbie. But is this a good move because it makes Trump look strong and it shifts the coverage away from the main thing, which is the disappointing job numbers?
Look, MAGA and conservatives for a long time have suspected that so many of these, you know, competent bureaucrats, whatever you want to call them, that non-ideological, non-partisan, we hear this all the time. I think conservatives have suspected for a long time that people in these positions might say they're non-partisan or they're really good at their jobs, but they are ideologically progressive or liberal. They're not ideologically pro-Trump. So the project of, I think, Trump 2.0, of the Trump second term, has been more serious about personnel and replacing people like this with people who believe in the Trump agenda and the MAGA agenda. Maybe this wasn't the best use of that power, but that is part of the project, is saying no more just nonpartisan, oh, I don't lean one way or the other, but Trump people.
Trump also just fired the IRS chief after just 2 months on the job. They were apparently having a dispute about the census or something related to that. So hundreds of Labor Department staffers produce these numbers based on all kinds of rules that Labor has set up. But I will say that Erica McIntyre could have done a better job explaining it rather than just leaving this stink bomb out there. Steph?
Sure. I think there's always room for more explanation. And right, the revisions in this report were significant, right? They were not small. They're not, you know, we've seen revisions in the past as well. You know, maybe some more explanation of these numbers would have been helpful for people who were looking at them and wondering, why do we see such a big change? But of course, it's not unusual when there is significant change in economic policy. And we are still waiting to see, are we going to see impacts from tariffs, right? Trump has been taking a whole new approach to things. And so we are going to see that reflected in some of these reports as well. But to your point, perhaps some more explanation to the American people would have been helpful here and wouldn't have left as much room for Trump to claim, you know, political motivations.
There are also revisions that come in because there's more data available to the Labor Department. More companies fill out these surveys and so forth. But let's pull back the camera a little bit. We've got Donald Trump successfully suing ABC and CBS. We have him going after universities, Columbia just agreeing to pay a $200 million fine. We have him going after law firms that employed people that he didn't like. And now ordering up criminal investigations. Especially going back to 2016, we'll talk about this more later, an election that he won. So could this be seen as pure retribution?
Well, maybe. I think the feeling of a lot of his supporters is that liberals, the media, people like Letitia James, you know, tried to find any excuse, Adam Schiff, to find some crime to hang Trump on, to put him in prison. Some of these, you know, we can debate how much the merit was. Some of these, I think even people who are very anti-Trump were like, well, is there merit to, you know, trying to get him on, you know, misrepresenting the wealth of some asset in New York? That's exactly what Adam Schiff is now facing, having to do with the mortgage issue, something of that nature.
Yeah.
Now, do I want everybody going to jail because they didn't, you know, cross their T's and dot their I's on some government form? No. But when you came after Trump on that basis, well, he's going to give it back to you.
the latest is New York Attorney General Letitia James, and she's the one who brought that huge civil suit where there was a $350 million judgment against the president, but he was, he was going to say he wasn't president at the time. But that's on appeal. So doesn't all this bring him a whole lot of negative coverage? And does that matter? Because he, as I noted earlier, continues to sort of dominate every news cycle.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, where you're watching the news, right? On some, we're going to see criticisms. This is kind of the retribution campaign that a lot of people were waiting for. And when I say a lot of people, I mean both Democrats who warned against this kind of action coming from the Justice Department, but also MAGA enthusiasts who have wanted to see this kind of action take place. There have been some in kind of the MAGA influence sphere, Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, who have felt like the Trump administration was slow to bring some of these investigations. They want to see some of these actors held accountable for the investigations and actions they took against Trump. So this has been long awaited for, and it does really feel like the Justice Department is really starting to ramp up and going after these, Trump enemies per se, and we'll see how that shakes out. But I don't think there's a lot of surprise. And it is interesting that Trump is leaning into this right now. Of course, this comes after that, all the Epstein saga is still ongoing. There's a lot of frustration in that same.
Are you saying it's a distraction?
It could be. I mean, I can't say that's what it is for sure. And I think these have long been in the works, right? We would expect these investigations into Adam Schiff and Letitia James to happen regardless, right?
But the difference here, Robbie, is that you don't usually have a president, and this is not like anonymous sources say, he comes out and says it in front of the camera, pushing justice or ordering justice to investigate people they're his opponents, but he perceives to be his enemies. That's unusual.
Well, Trump is unusually straightforward and honest about what he's doing because he just tweets it out or writes it on Truth Social.
Right.
But for instance, with the universities, what he's doing is actually very remarkable, similar in character to what the Obama and Biden administrations did with guidance to universities, threatening to withhold federal funding in order to get them to do Title IX related, gender, due process, speech related things.
So is it the same tactic,
it's the
but
exact
with a
same
different
tactic.
Ideological goal?
Different ideological goal, but getting universally negative coverage from the mainstream media when I'm like, well, where were you when Obama was doing this exact thing, using the exact same mechanism?
All right.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.